The mining station on Kepler 442 b hummed with activity as cargo shuttles loaded precious crystalline deposits bound for the Galactic Trade Federation's core worlds. Commander Sarah Chen watched the operation from the observation deck, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of synthetic coffee that had long since gone cold. 23 years of deep space assignments had taught her to appreciate the quiet moments between the chaos of interstellar commerce. The silence shattered when Lieutenant Rodriguez burst through the airlock, his face pale with exhaustion and something that looked dangerously close to panic. Behind him, two other crew members struggled with what appeared to be a massive containment unit, their movements careful and deliberate despite their obvious urgency. "Commander, we've got a situation," Rodriguez gasped, still catching his breath from whatever ordeal had brought him racing back to the station. "Found something in the abandoned Zephyrian research facility in Sector 7. Something they left behind." Sarah set down her coffee and moved closer to examine the containment unit. Through the transparent aluminum viewing panel, she could see what looked like a creature no larger than a house cat, covered in iridescent scales that shifted from deep emerald to brilliant gold as it moved. The being appeared to be sleeping, its tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. "Is that what I think it is?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the station's ambient noise. "Dragon whelp, ma'am. Confirmed by our xenobiologist. The Zephyrians had it in some kind of stasis chamber, but the power systems were failing when we found it. Looked like it had been abandoned for at least 6 months, maybe longer." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Dragons were among the most revered species in the galaxy, their intelligence and longevity making them natural leaders in the Galactic Council. But they were also notoriously protective of their young, and the idea that one would be abandoned was almost incomprehensible. "Have you attempted to contact the Zephyrian authorities?" she asked, though she already suspected what the answer would be. Rodriguez shook his head grimly. "Tried every official channel. The Zephyrians claim no knowledge of any research facility in this sector. When we pressed them about the dragon whelp, they terminated communications entirely. Same response from the Altarian Embassy and the Centaurian Trade Commission. And the Dragon Council? Won't even acknowledge our transmission requests. Seems like everyone in the galaxy suddenly developed selective hearing the moment we mentioned finding an abandoned dragon." Sarah stared at the sleeping creature, watching as its tiny claws flexed unconsciously in whatever dreams occupied its mind. The political ramifications of this discovery were staggering. Dragons lived for millennia and possessed perfect memory recall. If this whelp had been subjected to illegal experimentation, it would remember every detail once it matured. No wonder every major galactic power was suddenly claiming ignorance. "What's its condition?" she asked Dr. Martinez, the station's chief medical officer, who had been quietly scanning the creature with a handheld medical tricorder. "Malnourished, showing signs of prolonged stress, and there are some concerning neural pathway abnormalities that suggest experimental tampering, Dr." Martinez replied, her voice heavy with disgust. "Whatever the Zephyrians were doing to it, this little one has been through hell." The containment unit's life support systems beeped softly, indicating that the temporary environment was stable but wouldn't remain so indefinitely. Sarah realized they were facing a decision that would define not just the station's immediate future, but potentially humanity's standing in the galactic community. "Commander," Rodriguez said quietly, "there's something else. We detected several Zephyrian stealth ships on long-range sensors about 4 hours ago. They're maintaining position just outside the system's heliopause, but they haven't made any attempt to communicate or approach. They're waiting to see what we'll do," Sarah realized. "If we turn the whelp over to galactic authorities who clearly don't want it, they can claim we were complicit in whatever cover-up is happening. If we keep it, they can accuse us of kidnapping a dragon." The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of life support systems and the occasional soft chirp from the containment unit's monitoring equipment. Every human on the station understood the weight of the moment. Humanity was still considered a minor species in galactic politics, barely 3 centuries into their spacefaring era. They survived by being useful, reliable, and, most importantly, by never causing political complications for the established powers. Dr. Martinez broke the silence first. "From a medical standpoint, this creature needs immediate intensive care.
The neural damage alone could be permanent if not addressed quickly, and the nutritional deficiencies are severe enough to threaten its long-term development. How long do we have before we need to make a decision? Sarah asked. The containment unit's life support will last another 18 hours at most. After that, we either need to transfer it to our medical bay or...
She let the sentence hang unfinished. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing her own conflict reflected in their faces. These were good people, men and women who had volunteered for the isolation and danger of deep space mining because they believed in humanity's future among the stars. The idea of abandoning a helpless creature to political expediency went against everything they stood for, but the consequences of defying the galactic establishment could be catastrophic for their entire species. There's another factor to consider, Rodriguez added reluctantly. I ran a deep scan of that research facility before we left. The Zephyrians weren't just experimenting on the dragon. They had samples and data from at least a dozen different species, including some that are supposedly extinct. If this becomes a full investigation, it could expose things that powerful people want to stay buried. The weight of that revelation settled over the group like a physical presence. They weren't just dealing with an abandoned dragon whelp, they were sitting on evidence of crimes that could reshape galactic politics. The smart move, the safe move, would be to quietly transfer the creature to the nearest starport and let someone else deal with the consequences.
As if sensing their discussion, the dragon whelp stirred in its containment unit.
Its eyes opened for the first time since they'd brought it aboard, revealing irises of deep violet that seemed to hold depths of intelligence far beyond what should be possible for such a young creature. Those ancient eyes met Sarah's through the transparent barrier, and, in that moment, she felt a connection that transcended species boundaries. The whelp was afraid, she realized. Not just of its immediate circumstances, but of something deeper and more fundamental. It had learned not to trust the voices and faces that surrounded it, had been conditioned to expect pain rather than comfort from those who claimed to care for its welfare. "Ma'am," Dr. Martinez said softly, "it's trying to communicate." The dragon whelp had raised one tiny claw to the containment barrier, its violet eyes still locked on Sarah's. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate, a reaching out that spoke of desperate hope despite everything it had endured. Sarah made her decision. Transfer it to Medical Bay 3 and establish a full life support environment suitable for dragon physiology. I want round-the-clock monitoring and the best care we can provide. Commander, Rodriguez said carefully, the political ramifications. I'm aware of the political ramifications, Lieutenant. I'm also aware that we're human beings first and galactic citizens second. This creature needs our help, and, by God, it's going to get it. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity as the station's medical staff worked to establish proper care for their unexpected patient. Dr. Martinez had to improvise much of the treatment protocol, as detailed information about dragon physiology was closely guarded by the Dragon Council and not readily available to minor species like humanity. What they did know came primarily from academic texts and basic galactic biology databases. Dragons were carbon-based like humans, but their metabolism was far more complex, requiring a careful balance of rare minerals and specific atmospheric conditions. Their neural development was also unique, with cognitive abilities that increased exponentially during the first several months of life. Its brain activity is off the charts, Dr. Martinez reported during the evening shift change. The neural pathways that were damaged are beginning to repair themselves now that it's in a proper environment, but there's something unusual about the healing process. It's almost like the brain is rebuilding itself according to some kind of genetic template. Sarah stood beside the dragon whelp's new habitat, a hastily constructed environment that approximated the atmospheric conditions of the dragon homeworld based on available data. The little creature was awake now, moving around its enclosure with increasing confidence as its strength returned. It had shown remarkable intelligence, quickly learning to use the feeding mechanism they'd installed and even demonstrating what appeared to be curiosity about its surroundings. "Any word from the Zephyrian ships?" Sarah asked. Still maintaining their position outside the system. No communications, no movement. They're definitely waiting for something. As if summoned by their conversation, the bridge communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom.
Commander, we're receiving a transmission on diplomatic frequencies. It's from the Galactic Council directly.
Sarah felt her stomach drop. Direct communication from the Galactic Council to a minor species station was unprecedented, and rarely indicated good news.
Put it through to Medical Bay 3.
The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the imposing figure of Council Administrator Vaxlon, a Altarian whose species was known for their diplomatic skills and their complete lack of emotional expression. His 4 eyes regarded Sarah with what she interpreted as barely contained irritation.
Commander Chen of the Human Mining Station Prometheus 7.
The Galactic Council has been made aware of your acquisition of certain biological materials from the Kepler 442b system. We are prepared to offer immediate transport and appropriate compensation for the transfer of said materials to proper galactic authorities. Administrator Vaxlon, Sarah replied carefully, we found an abandoned and injured creature that required immediate medical attention.
Our actions were purely humanitarian in nature. Your concern for biological specimens is noted and appreciated, Commander Chen.
However, the materials in question are subject to various treaties and agreements that supersede local humanitarian concerns. We trust you understand the delicate nature of interspecies relations and the importance of proper channels in such matters. Behind the diplomatic language, Sarah heard the threat clearly. Surrender the dragon whelp, or face the consequences of defying the galactic establishment. She glanced at the little creature, which had moved to the front of its habitat and was watching the holographic exchange with what appeared to be intense interest.
I understand your position, Administrator. However, as the creature is currently under medical care, any transfer would need to wait until our medical staff determines it's safe to move.
Vaxlon's expression didn't change, but Sarah caught the slight tightening around his eyes that indicated displeasure in Altarian body language.
Commander, we are not making a request. The Galactic Council has dispatched a specialized transport vessel to your location.
It will arrive within 48 hours to collect the biological specimen and conduct a full investigation of your facility's handling of the matter. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Sarah staring at the empty air where the hologram had been. 48 hours to figure out how to protect a helpless creature from powers that could destroy humanity's place in galactic civilization with a simple administrative decree.
Well, Dr. Martinez said dryly, that could have gone worse. How exactly could that have gone worse? Rodriguez demanded.
They could have sent a battleship instead of a transport vessel. Sarah wasn't sure if the doctor was trying to be reassuring or if she genuinely believed they were getting off lightly. Either way, they now had less than 2 days to decide whether humanity would stand by its principles or bow to political pressure. The dragon whelp moved closer to the habitat's barrier, its violet eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. For a moment, she could have sworn it was trying to tell her something, some crucial piece of information that could change everything about their situation. But dragons didn't develop telepathic abilities until they reached adolescence, and this one was clearly just a baby. Whatever intelligence she thought she saw in those ancient-looking eyes had to be her imagination, colored by the stress of their impossible situation. As the evening shift settled into their routines, Sarah found herself staying in the medical bay longer than necessary, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. The dragon whelp had grown more active as its strength returned, exploring every centimeter of its habitat with the kind of systematic thoroughness that suggested genuine intelligence rather than mere animal curiosity.
It's remarkable, Dr. Martinez said, joining Sarah at the observation window. In just 12 hours, its vital signs have improved dramatically. The neural damage is healing faster than should be possible, and its physical development seems to be accelerating. Whatever those Zephyrians were doing to it, removal from that environment has allowed its natural healing processes to resume. How long until it's fully recovered? At this rate? Maybe another day or two for physical recovery. The neural development is harder to predict, but I'm seeing activity patterns that suggest rapid cognitive advancement. This little one might be far more aware of what's happening than we realize. That night, Sarah found sleep elusive. Her quarters felt cramped and suffocating as she wrestled with the decision that could define the rest of her life. Through the porthole beside her bed, she could see the distant stars that had called to humanity for centuries,
promising adventure and discovery among the cosmic community. Now those same stars seemed to be watching, waiting to see if humanity would prove worthy of the trust placed in them, or if they would be just another minor species willing to sacrifice their principles for political survival. The answer, she realized, lay not in the stars but in the small creature sleeping in Medical Bay 3, trusting humans to protect it when its own species and the galactic community had failed. Tomorrow would bring the Galactic Council's transport vessel and the moment of decision that could change everything. But tonight, for just a few more hours, a small dragon whelp slept safely under human protection, and perhaps that was enough. The alarm that woke Commander Sarah Chen at 0347 hours was not the gentle chime of the station's normal wake cycle, but the harsh klaxon that indicated an emergency requiring immediate command attention. She rolled out of her bunk, pulled on her uniform, and was heading for the bridge before her mind had fully processed what was happening. "Report," she demanded as she stepped into the command center.
"Ma'am, we've got multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace," Lieutenant Rodriguez called from the sensor station.
3 heavy cruisers, Zephyrian configuration, taking position around the station. "They're not responding to hails, but they're definitely targeting us with active sensor locks."
Sarah's blood turned cold.
The Galactic Council had said 48 hours, but apparently someone had decided not to wait for diplomatic niceties.
"Any sign of the Council transport vessel?" "Negative, ma'am.
Just the Zephyrians, and they've positioned themselves to block any escape routes from the system." The main view screen flickered to life, showing the 3 warships arranged in a perfect triangle around the mining station. Each vessel was easily 10 times the mass of Prometheus 7, bristling with weapons that could reduce the human facility to debris in minutes. "They're jamming our communications," the communications officer reported.
"No outgoing signals are getting through, and they're blocking all standard diplomatic frequencies."
Sarah stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through increasingly desperate options. The Zephyrians had apparently decided that whatever secret they were protecting was worth starting an interspecies incident over. That suggested the dragon whelp was far more important than a simple abandoned research subject. "Commander," Dr. Martinez's voice came through the intercom from Medical Bay 3, "you need to see this.
Our patient is exhibiting some very unusual behavior."
Against her better judgment, Sarah left the bridge in Rodriguez's capable hands and made her way to the medical bay. What she found there made her question everything she thought she knew about dragon physiology and development. The dragon whelp was no longer the tiny, helpless creature they had rescued less than 24 hours ago. It had grown noticeably, now roughly the size of a medium dog, and its scales had taken on a more vibrant coloration that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. But, more shocking than the physical changes was the obvious intelligence in its violet eyes as it watched her approach. "The growth rate is unprecedented," Dr. Martinez explained, her voice filled with equal parts fascination and concern. "Its neural activity has increased exponentially, and I'm detecting what appears to be organized thought patterns that shouldn't develop for months in normal dragon maturation." As Sarah approached the habitat, the dragon whelp moved to the barrier and placed one claw against the transparent surface. This time, however, the gesture was accompanied by something else entirely. Images flashed through Sarah's mind, clear and vivid despite their impossible origin.
She saw the Zephyrian research facility from the dragon's perspective, scientists in environmental suits conducting experiments that made her stomach turn.
She saw other creatures, some she recognized and many she didn't, all subjected to procedures that had nothing to do with legitimate scientific research. And she saw something else, something that made her understand why the Zephyrians were willing to risk everything to retrieve their lost subject. The dragon whelp wasn't just a victim of their experiments. It was the result of them. "Doctor," Sarah said carefully, "what do you know about genetic manipulation in dragon physiology?"
"Very little.
Dragon genetics are heavily classified by the Galactic Council, and most research into their biological processes is restricted to their own species."
"Why?"
Sarah struggled to process what she had seen in those brief, impossible visions. "I think our patient isn't exactly a natural dragon whelp.
I think it's something the Zephyrians created." Before Dr. Martinez could respond, the station shuddered as tractor beams locked onto its hull. Through the medical bay's porthole, Sarah could see one of the Zephyrian cruisers moving closer, its massive bulk blotting out the stars.
Commander Chen to the bridge, emergency, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. Sarah ran for the command center, leaving Dr. Martinez to monitor their increasingly mysterious patient. When she arrived at the bridge, she found her crew staring at the main viewscreen in a mixture of awe and terror. The lead Zephyrian vessel had extended a docking tube toward Prometheus 7's main airlock. But, instead of the standard diplomatic approach, they were using military boarding procedures, the kind reserved for hostile vessels or criminal suspects.
"They're cutting through our outer airlock," Rodriguez reported.
Estimated time to breach, 12 minutes.
"Any word on what they want?"
"Nothing official. But, we've been monitoring their internal communications, and they're talking about specimen retrieval and evidence containment."
"Doesn't sound like they're planning to leave witnesses."
Sarah felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a physical burden. She had 36 human lives under her protection, a growing dragon that might be the key to exposing galactic-scale crimes, and 12 minutes to figure out how to prevent a massacre.
"Options?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be depressingly limited.
"We could surrender unconditionally and hope they honored diplomatic immunity," Rodriguez offered without much conviction.
"Or we could fight, but that would be suicide. Our mining lasers might scratch their paint if we got lucky."
Sarah stared at the tactical display, watching as the Zephyrian boarding teams prepared to breach their station. In a few minutes, heavily armed soldiers would be stomping through the corridors of Prometheus 7, and there was absolutely nothing her crew could do to stop them. Except there was one option no one had mentioned yet.
"Rodriguez, how long would it take to evacuate the station's data cores and essential personnel to the emergency pods?"
"Maybe 8 minutes if we move fast and don't worry about personal gear."
"But, ma'am, the pods don't have interstellar capability. We'd be stranded in the local system until someone came looking for us."
"Better stranded than dead," Sarah muttered. Then, louder, "Initiate emergency evacuation procedures."
"I want all non-essential personnel in the pods within 6 minutes.
Essential crew remains behind to manage the evacuation and destroy sensitive data."
As her crew leaped into action, Sarah made her way back to Medical Bay 3.
If they were going to abandon the station, they couldn't leave the dragon whelp to fall back into Zephyrian hands. But, transporting a rapidly growing alien creature in a small emergency pod presented its own challenges. She found Dr. Martinez frantically downloading medical data while keeping one eye on their patient, which had grown even larger in the few minutes she'd been gone. The dragon was now definitely the size of a large dog, and its eyes held an intelligence that was becoming increasingly difficult to deny.
"Doctor, we're evacuating the station. Can the dragon survive in an emergency pod environment?" "For a short time, yes.
But, Sarah, you need to understand what's happening here. This creature's development isn't just accelerated, it's being guided by something.
The neural pathways are forming in patterns that suggest external influence, almost like programming." "Programming?"
The Zephyrians didn't just experiment on a dragon whelp. They created some kind of hybrid, a dragon with artificially enhanced capabilities.
And, whatever they did, it's still happening.
The growth rate is increasing, and so is the cognitive development. As if to emphasize her point, the dragon whelp moved to the center of its habitat and began making a series of complex gestures with its claws. The movements were too precise and deliberate to be random, clearly some form of communication attempt. "It's trying to tell us something," Sarah realized. Dr. Martinez pulled up a translation interface on her medical tablet, though she shook her head even as she did so. Dragon gestural language is incredibly complex, and this is probably just instinctual movement anyway. A creature this young shouldn't have the cognitive development necessary for true communication. But, as Sarah watched, the dragon's gestures became more urgent and specific. And, somehow, impossibly, she found herself understanding the meaning behind the movements.
"Danger. Escape. Together."
"It knows we're in trouble," Sarah whispered.
"It knows what's happening and it wants to help."
Before Dr. Martinez could respond, the station shuddered again, this time from the impact of the Zephyrian boarding tube making contact with the outer hull.
They were out of time.
Get the portable life support unit ready for transport, Sarah ordered. We're taking our patient with us.
The next few minutes blurred together in a chaos of emergency procedures and desperate improvisation.
The dragon whelp seemed to understand the urgency of their situation, remaining calm and cooperative as they transferred it to the portable habitat unit. By the time the Zephyrians had cut through the outer airlock, the last human evacuation pod was launching from the far side of the station. Sarah found herself crammed into Emergency Pod 7 along with Dr. Martinez, 2 junior crew members, and a dragon that was rapidly outgrowing its portable containment. Through the pod's tiny viewport, she watched as Zephyrian soldiers swarmed through Prometheus 7's corridors, their movements efficient and purposeful as they searched for what they had come to retrieve. They're going to be very disappointed when they realize we're gone, Rodriguez's voice crackled over the pod's communication system from his position in Pod 3. Question is, how long before they start hunting for us, Sarah replied. The emergency pods were designed to be difficult to detect, but they weren't invisible. If the Zephyrians conducted a thorough search of the local system, they would eventually find the refugees. As if summoned by her thoughts, the dragon whelp began gesturing again, its movements even more urgent than before. This time, however, the meaning was unmistakable even without telepathic enhancement. Ships.
Coming. Friends. Doctor, are you seeing this?
Dr. Martinez was staring at her medical tablet in disbelief. The creature's neural activity just spiked off the charts. It's like its brain just activated entirely new sections that weren't there before. Through the pod's viewport, Sarah could see new contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. But these weren't Zephyrian vessels or Galactic Council ships. The configuration was unlike anything in the standard databases, sleek and organic-looking in a way that seemed almost alive.
Rodriguez, are you reading those new contacts? Affirmative, Commander. Unknown configuration, but they're broadcasting on Dragon diplomatic frequencies. I think someone just called in the cavalry. As Sarah watched, the newcomer ships moved toward the Zephyrian positions with fluid grace that made even advanced starships look clumsy by comparison.
She had never seen vessels move like that, flowing through space as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions.
Dragon ships, Dr. Martinez breathed. Those are actual Dragon Council vessels, not the standard galactic fleet ships they usually use for official business.
The communication between the Dragon ships and the Zephyrians was brief and, apparently decisive. Within minutes, the 3 Zephyrian cruisers were withdrawing from the system, their powerful engines pushing them toward the hyperspace jump point as if their lives depended on reaching it quickly. One of the Dragon vessels approached the cluster of emergency pods, and Sarah found herself holding her breath as ancient technology far beyond human understanding gently embraced their tiny craft. A soft chime indicated that their pod's communication system had been activated by external means. The voice that spoke to them was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard, musical and complex in a way that suggested thoughts far too intricate for simple verbal communication. But, somehow, the meaning was clear despite the alien nature of the sounds.
Human vessels, this is Elder Serathana of the Dragon Council.
We have come to retrieve one of our own, who has been calling to us across the void. We understand you have shown kindness to a lost child, and, for this, we are grateful. Sarah looked at the dragon whelp, which was now nearly too large for its portable habitat. The creature's violet eyes met hers, and, in that gaze she saw intelligence that was ancient beyond her comprehension, despite being housed in such a young form.
Elder Serathana, this is Commander Saracen of the human mining station Prometheus 7. We found the young dragon abandoned in a Zephyrian research facility and provided medical care. We're glad to see it return to its people. There was a pause before the elder responded, and Sarah got the impression that complex communications were taking place on frequencies she couldn't detect. Commander Chen, the child you rescued is not quite what you believe it to be.
The Zephyrians attempted to create something that should not exist, a hybrid of dragon genetics and artificial enhancement. They sought to produce a creature with our wisdom but, without our independence, something that could be controlled and used for their purposes.
But it didn't work, Sarah realized. Indeed. Dragon consciousness cannot be constrained by artificial means. Instead of creating a slave, they created something entirely new. A dragon with capabilities that exceed even our own understanding, one that will grow to become either our greatest hope or our greatest fear. Dr. Martinez leaned closer to the communication pickup. Elder, the creature showed rapid development and what appeared to be telepathic abilities far beyond normal dragon maturation rates. The child's development has been accelerated by necessity. When it sensed danger, it began advancing through growth stages that should take months or years. Its mind reached across space to call for help, something that should be impossible for one so young. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What happens now? Now, we must determine what the child will become. The Zephyrians created something unprecedented, and the consequences of their actions will ripple through the galaxy for millennia to come. But, first, we must ensure its safety and proper development. The Dragon ship's tractor beam gently guided their emergency pods toward a docking bay that seemed to adjust its size to accommodate the human vessels. As they settled into the alien craft, Sarah realized that humanity had just become unwitting participants in something that would change the balance of galactic power forever. The dragon whelp pressed itself against its habitat's barrier, its eyes fixed on Sarah with an expression that seemed to convey gratitude and something else, something that might have been promise or warning. Whatever the Zephyrians had created, whatever consequences their illegal experiments would bring, humanity had chosen to stand on the side of compassion rather than political expedience. Now they would have to live with the results of that decision, for better or worse. As the emergency pods were secured within the Dragon vessel, Sarah caught a glimpse through the viewports of Prometheus 7 in the distance, dark and abandoned now that the Zephyrians had finished their search. Her home for the past 3 years was gone, and, with it the simple certainty of humanity's minor role in galactic affairs. The dragon whelp had grown again during the transfer, now large enough that its portable habitat was becoming dangerously cramped. But, more importantly, its eyes had changed, becoming deeper and more complex, as if ancient knowledge was awakening behind that violet gaze. Elder Sirathana's voice echoed through the docking bay as the human refugees were welcomed aboard their rescue vessel. Commander Chen, your species has shown wisdom in protecting one who could not protect itself. This act will not be forgotten, and the child you saved will remember your kindness for all the centuries of its life. Centuries, Sarah thought as she watched the dragon that no longer looked quite so young. They had saved a creature that would outlive human civilization itself, and, in doing so, they had changed the course of galactic history in ways they were only beginning to understand. 6 months after the rescue at Prometheus 7, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the observation lounge of the Dragon Council's flagship, watching humanity's first formal diplomatic presentation to the galaxy's most ancient species. The irony wasn't lost on her that humans, barely 3 centuries into space travel, were now serving as advisors to beings who had been exploring the cosmos since before Earth's continents had settled into their current positions. The dragon she had helped rescue no longer resembled the tiny, helpless creature they had found in that abandoned Zephyrian laboratory. Zephyr, as the young dragon had chosen to call itself after learning human naming conventions, now stood nearly 3 meters tall, its scales shimmering with an opalescent quality that seemed to capture and reflect light from dimensions beyond normal perception. The investigation is complete, Elder Sirathana announced to the assembled gathering, her melodious voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. The evidence recovered from the Zephyrian research facility, combined with Zephyr's genetic memories of the experimentation process, has revealed crimes against sapient species on a scale unprecedented in galactic history. Sarah watched as holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing data that made her stomach turn even 6 months after first learning the truth. The Zephyrians hadn't just been experimenting on a single dragon whelp. They had been conducting illegal genetic manipulation on dozens of species, attempting to create enhanced beings that could be controlled and used as living weapons. The scope of their violations spans 17 different species across 43 star systems, Elder Sirathana continued. They sought to create perfect soldiers, perfect spies, perfect servants by combining the natural abilities of various species with artificial enhancements designed to ensure absolute obedience. Representative Kalthor of the Eltarian Diplomatic Corps shifted uncomfortably in his specially designed seating area. Elder Sirathana, while these revelations are certainly disturbing, the Zephyrians have already been sanctioned by the Galactic Council. Surely this matter can be considered closed.
Zephyr's head turned toward the Eltarian diplomat, and Sarah felt the temperature in the chamber seem to drop several degrees. When the young dragon spoke, its voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond human hearing, creating an effect that was both beautiful and vaguely threatening. Honorable Calthor, the sanctions imposed by the Galactic Council amount to economic restrictions and diplomatic censure. They do not address the fundamental question of what should be done with beings like myself, who were created through illegal means but now exist as sentient entities with rights of our own. It was a question that had haunted Sarah's dreams for months. Zephyr was undeniably alive, undeniably intelligent, and undeniably unlike any natural dragon that had ever existed. The hybrid possessed capabilities that exceeded even elder dragons, combined with perspectives and insights that came from its unique creation process. But it was also evidence of crimes that multiple galactic powers wanted to keep buried. Moreover, Zephyr continued, its violet eyes sweeping across the assembled representatives, I am not the only surviving result of these experiments. The Zephyrians successfully created at least 6 other hybrid entities before their research was interrupted. 3 are currently held by the Centaurian Empire, 2 by the Vegan Consortium, and 1 remains missing. The silence that followed this revelation was deafening. Sarah watched as diplomatic minds raced to calculate the implications of hybrid beings with unknown capabilities scattered across the galaxy, each potentially holding evidence of their creator's crimes. Elder Sirathana's massive form shifted slightly, a movement that somehow conveyed both sadness and determination. This brings us to the matter we have convened to address. The Dragon Council has determined that beings created through illegal genetic manipulation should not be held responsible for the crimes of their creators.
However, their very existence poses challenges that the current galactic legal framework is not equipped to handle.
Captain Torres, who had replaced Sarah as commander of humanity's mining operations in the sector, leaned forward in his seat.
Elder, what is the Dragon Council proposing?
We propose the establishment of a new organization, one dedicated to locating and protecting beings who have been subjected to illegal genetic manipulation, while simultaneously investigating and prosecuting those responsible for such crimes. This organization would operate with full Dragon Council backing and would be staffed by representatives from species who have demonstrated both integrity and the courage to act against overwhelming political pressure. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat as she realized where this conversation was heading. We propose that humanity serve as the primary administrative species for this organization, Elder Sirathana announced. Your actions at Prometheus 7 demonstrated that humans possess the moral clarity necessary to make difficult decisions under pressure, and your relative newcomer status in galactic politics makes you less susceptible to the corruption that has allowed these crimes to continue unchecked. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as carefully controlled chaos, as representatives from a dozen species began speaking simultaneously in various languages and communication methods. Sarah caught fragments of Altarian diplomatic protests, Centaurian economic concerns, and what sounded like vegan religious objections to human involvement in what they considered a purely alien matter. Through it all, Zephyr remained motionless at the center of the chamber, its enhanced senses undoubtedly tracking every conversation and nuance of meaning that the humans were missing. The young dragon had become something that shouldn't exist according to natural law, but its presence was reshaping galactic politics in ways that no one could have predicted. If I may, Sarah found herself saying, her voice somehow cutting through the diplomatic cacophony. Before humanity accepts such a responsibility, I think we need to understand exactly what we're being asked to do. Elder Sirathana's massive head turned toward her, and Sarah felt the weight of attention from a being whose memories span geological ages.
Commander Chen, speak freely. Your questions are welcome. The other hybrid beings that Zephyr mentioned, what's their current status? Are they prisoners, allies, or something else entirely? Zephyr answered before the elder could respond. Of the 6 others, 3 are being held by the Centaurians as experimental subjects for their own research programs. 2 have been integrated into vegan military units as special operatives, though they believe they are serving voluntarily. The 6th disappeared during the Andromedan incident last year and is presumed destroyed. So we're not just talking about an investigation organization, Sarah realized. We're talking about a rescue operation that would require confronting some of the most powerful governments in the galaxy. Precisely, Elder Serathana confirmed.
And it must be done carefully, as these beings possess capabilities that could destabilize galactic civilization if they chose to use them for destructive purposes. They need guidance, protection, and, most importantly, they need to know that they are not alone. Dr. Martinez, who had been granted a position as humanity's chief xenobiologist for the proceedings, raised her hand tentatively.
Elder, what about Zephyr's continued development?
The rate of growth and cognitive advancement we observed was unprecedented.
Are we dealing with beings that will continue evolving indefinitely? Zephyr's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement if it had appeared on a human face.
Dr. Martinez, my development has stabilized now that I am in a proper environment.
However, you are correct to be concerned about my siblings.
The artificial enhancements combined with various species' natural abilities have created beings with capabilities that even I do not fully understand.
Which brings us to the most crucial point, Elder Serathana interjected.
These hybrid beings cannot be left to develop without guidance. Their creators designed them to be weapons, and, while their consciousness has proven impossible to control, their destructive potential remains very real. Left alone, they could become threats to galactic stability on a scale we have never faced. Sarah felt the weight of destiny settling around her like a physical presence. Humanity had stumbled into this situation through simple moral instinct, choosing to help a creature in need rather than calculating political advantage. Now that decision was being offered as the foundation for an organization that could reshape how justice was administered across the galaxy.
What kind of authority would this organization have? Captain Torres asked.
If we're going up against major galactic powers, we'll need more than good intentions and Dragon Council support. Full investigative authority backed by Dragon Council enforcement capabilities, Elder Serathana replied. The Council has maintained neutrality in galactic politics for millennia, but crimes against genetic sanctity strike at the foundation of what we consider sacred.
We will provide whatever support is necessary to ensure these investigations succeed. Representative Kalfor's diplomatic composure finally cracked.
Elder, you're talking about giving a minor species unprecedented authority to investigate and, potentially prosecute major galactic governments.
The political ramifications of allowing genetic slavery to continue unchecked are far worse, Zephyr interrupted, its voice carrying harmonics that made the Eltarian diplomat visibly flinch. I have accessed the genetic memories of my creation process. The Zephyrians were not working alone.
They received funding and technical support from at least 7 major galactic powers, including some represented in this very chamber. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the subtle hum of the dragon ship's engines and the distant whisper of cosmic radiation filtering through the vessel's shields. Sarah realized they had just witnessed the moment when galactic politics shifted from carefully maintained diplomatic balance to something much more dangerous and unpredictable. The choice before humanity is simple, Elder Serathana said, her ancient voice carrying the weight of civilizations. Accept the responsibility to protect beings who cannot protect themselves, or watch as the galaxy slides into an era where genetic manipulation and the creation of slave species becomes normalized. Sarah looked around the chamber at the faces of her fellow humans, seeing her own mix of fear and determination reflected in their expressions. They were being offered power beyond anything their species had ever wielded, but it came with responsibilities that could destroy them if they failed to meet the challenge. I need to consult with Earth authorities, Captain Torres said carefully. A decision of this magnitude, with respect, Captain, Zephyr interrupted, time is not a luxury we possess. My siblings are being subjected to continued experimentation and exploitation every day we delay. And there are indications that other species are beginning their own genetic manipulation programs, inspired by the Zephyrian research. Sarah made her decision with the same instinctive certainty that had led her to protect an abandoned dragon whelp 6 months earlier.
Humanity accepts the responsibility.
We'll need time to organize and establish proper protocols, but we accept.
Elder Serathana's massive head nodded slowly.
Then, let it be recorded that on this day, the Hybrid Protection and Investigation Authority was established under human administration with Dragon Council backing. May wisdom guide your actions and courage strengthen your resolve. As the formal ceremony concluded and representatives began filing out of the chamber to report back to their respective governments, Sarah found herself alone with Zephyr in the observation lounge. The young dragon had grown again during the proceedings, its form now approaching the size of an adult dragon despite being less than a year old. "You realize what you've committed your species to," Zephyr said, its voice carrying notes of both gratitude and concern. "The beings you'll be trying to rescue are not helpless victims. We are weapons that learn to think for ourselves, and some of my siblings may not welcome your intervention." "Are you warning me or threatening me?" Sarah asked. "I am being honest with you, as you were honest with me when I was small and afraid in that medical bay. The path ahead will test humanity's principles in ways you cannot imagine. There will be times when protecting one of us means going to war with an entire star system." Sarah stared out at the infinite expanse of space, thinking about the tiny mining station where this had all begun and the crew members who had chosen compassion over political safety. "Then, we'll face those tests when they come. Humanity didn't reach the stars by avoiding difficult decisions." "No," Zephyr agreed, "you reached them by being willing to help creatures you barely understood. That is why the Elder chose you, and why I believe you will succeed where others would fail." In the months that followed, the Hybrid Protection and Investigation Authority grew from a desperate improvisation into an organization that commanded respect and fear in equal measure across the galaxy. Teams of human investigators, backed by Dragon Council technology and Zephyr's unique insights, began the dangerous work of locating and protecting beings who existed in the shadows of galactic civilization. Some missions succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, reuniting isolated hybrids with others like themselves and exposing criminal networks that spanned multiple star systems. Others ended in tragedy, with rescue attempts triggering conflicts that cost thousands of lives and left entire planets scarred by warfare. But, through it all, humanity maintained the principle that had guided Sarah's decision in that medical base so many months ago. Every sentient being deserved protection, regardless of how they had come into existence or what powers they possessed. It was a simple moral concept that became the foundation for a new form of galactic justice. Zephyr grew to become not just the authority's most valuable asset, but its moral compass, using capabilities that exceeded even Dragon Elder understanding to locate others like itself across the vast expanse of the galaxy. The young dragon that humanity had saved from abandonment became the shepherd for an entire new category of sapient life. And, in the end, that was perhaps the most human thing of all, the idea that how a being came to exist mattered far less than what they chose to do with the life they had been given. It was a lesson that would echo through galactic civilization for millennia, forever linking humanity's name with the day they chose to protect the Forsaken rather than abandon them to their fate. The stars that had once seemed to judge humanity's worthiness now bore witness to their greatest triumph, the moment when a minor species chose to become guardians of those who had no one else to defend them. And, in making that choice, they proved themselves worthy of the trust placed in them by beings whose wisdom spanned the ages of the cosmos itself.